and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, you can call me Xanthi, and today we are diving deep into the soundscapes contained within minutes 16 through 20 of Star Wars Episode 4, also known as A New Hope or Star Wars the Motion Picture. In this excerpt of the film, we start with the Sandcrawler trucking along in the dusk on Tatooine, and we end with Threepio about to get his luxurious oil bath. Today's guest is Matt from Blue Bantha Milk Co. Oh my gosh, why did I say and Co? Is that right?
It's okay.
Oh my gosh.
That's good. Most people don't.
Anyway, Matt from Blue Bantha Milk Co., who I'm very fascinated by. I have so many questions for you, but we'll save that for after the discussion. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, no, thank you for having me. This is exciting because you do a really great podcast, and I, as I alluded to earlier, know very little about music, or I know what I like. I have very little musical vocabulary. So anytime I get an opportunity to chat about that, I feel very fortunate. I think it's I feel lucky to be able to talk about something that I don't know much about.
Oh, well, I feel very lucky to have you. For some context, the reason that I reached out to Matt, and as you know, Matt, the reason I reached out to you is because I had tweeted, what sound or just what about A New Hope is seared in your memory, or what's the first thing you think of? And you responded with I don't know how you phrased it, but you said it was Threepio saying that he was ready to take his oil bath or whatever, or this oil bath is going to feel so good.
Yep, the thank the maker line.
Yeah.
Thank the maker. This oil bath is going to feel so good. That is seared in my brain.
Right. And that happens in this span of minutes. And I actually had never known this my whole life, that is what C-3PO says in that line. And to me, that line sonically, the sound of it was burned in my memory, but it was burned in my memory more of in a in the sort of pitches of the way that C-3PO says it, sort of this oil bath is going to feel so good. I didn't really know that he was saying oil bath, but I knew that it sounded I don't know, the dips of the voice or whatever.
Yeah. That's it's like that clip that was floating around the internet years ago of that contestant on one of those singing shows. I think it was in somewhere in South America, and she was singing "Can't Live," but she was singing it phonetic. Yeah, Ken Lee. And she was singing the whole song phonetically, and none of it was words. And sometimes that happens to me as well. I just understand a sentence phonetically, and then someone says what the actual words are. I'm like, those are the words.
Same.
And I think I said to you afterwards the embarrassing thing about the Star Spangled Banner. I don't know if you saw that response, and it was that so I'm 39, and it wasn't until this year that I realized that there's a particular line. What is it? So it's Dawn's Early Light.
Mm-hmm.
But by the dawn's early light in the Star Spangled Banner, I had this phonetic memory of it that I thought it was Dondally light. And my partner Lisa just said it in a conversation, corrected me not that long ago, and you could see the gears probably turning in my head, going, "You mean Dondally isn't some oldie time word that doesn't exist anywhere else because it's an old timey word that no one uses anymore?" And it took a while, but yeah. So now that's a running joke in my household about how I remembered Dondally my whole life as a word.
That's really funny, but I think that is actually pretty common, and I think not only with dialogue but with music. So we were talking before I hit record, just that even if people can't explain music in terms of notes, there is a certain type of memory like that it imprints, I think, you know, I mean, it's, I guess, how else would we be able to hum the way things happen? And it's like, I think when most people hum, they're not just like humming notes, they're humming like the attack of the note and the sort of the shape of it too, or the shape of a phrase.
Yeah.
Speaking
Well,
of,
I guess music's lyrical in a sense. Like even when it hasn't got words, it's lyrical. So I don't know. My association to some of the music is feeling.
mhm.
It's like, so what, you know, it's always about like what are you feeling out of that? Because I don't have necessarily the words or the vocab to describe it any better than how I felt in that moment.
Well, if at any point during this conversation, as we follow the droids on their adventure, you want to chime in with your feeling, please, please share that, and then I can corroborate with that my feeling that I'm getting too. It'll be interesting. Uh, so here in this set of minutes, so minutes 16 through 20, it corresponds with the time code 1501 to 20 minutes in the film, if you're following along. And this particular clip starts sort of where the last track ends. So it's sort of like that's the brass. And that's an exterior shot of Tatooine. It's like the rock canyon. The Sandcrawler is just like slowly lumbering along in the dusk. And yeah, we have this like staccato brass thing. It's do 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 do. And I don't know
And it's
about you, but
right
that
after the droids got together. Like they're back together.
yeah.
They know that they're on the same. They're together, and then it's like a big like what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen to them? There's tension. They feel uncertainty, and I feel that in the music.
Oh, you mean like in the track in general, like a little bit
Yeah.
before this? Yeah.
Yep.
I think this part is like really humorous almost. It for some reason it reminds me of like, do you know that piano song that kids play, or not just kids, but a lot of people? It's called Chopsticks.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Something about like
Yeah.
the way that this part of the track is orchestrated reminds me of Chopsticks. I think it's
Of
because,
chopsticks.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's going like, sorry, but it's like, because you have like the top melody is going dee 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 dee, and then you have sort of a lower brass going the opposite direction. It's called contrary motion, when like one line is going up and one line is going down. So you have like, and you kind of have them, you know, it's hard to explain, but just two lines going in opposite directions and kind of ending on the landing note. And it kind of reminds me of Chopsticks in that way. Not just Chopsticks,
Yeah.
but there are a lot of things that end like that, certainly. But I don't know, it's just humorous to me how it just
Yeah.
ends like that.
Yeah. Well, it's sudden and abrupt, but what you said about like the notes going in different directions, maybe that's the feeling of uncertainty that I'm picking up because it
Mm.
is heading in different audible directions. And I think they're, you know, they don't know what's going to happen to them. The droids are just stuck in this sand crawler with a bunch of junkers, and they don't know what their fate's going to be. It's quite a big climb to that moment, and then it just drops off completely, and it kind of leaves you with that like you feel their uncertainty, and then it's just like done,
I
done,
do.
and that leaves a feeling.
I think like the dissonance of like, because when that note comes in, it sort of sounds a little bit like a disruptive type of note. And that can, I definitely am getting the like uncertain vibe there too, or sort of like trouble might be looming vibe. And then the fact that it
Yeah,
kind of resolves, actually, I feel like that droids are happy to be reunited. And even though there's uncertainty coming afterward, at least there's like a very temporary relief of them at least being together, and then who knows what's next. So it's like a little bit of
yeah,
both,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And something about like how that track ends, and in this 5-minute scene, there's a lot of I don't want to say silence, but there is a lot of space given to certain sounds. And so right then, because it ends, we really hear the transport, like we really hear the Sandcrawler.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah,
sounds
you do.
heavy. It sounds like you can really hear the effort that it's making. It's like this huge thing kind of it must be kind of hard to drive that thing through the desert, right?
Yeah, well, I remember seeing in the second season of The Mandalorian, like finally getting to see the view from outside of the Sandcrawler. And it's like lots of things in Star Wars, like even the Imperial walkers, just they're really obsessed with having like little tiny slits to sort of look through on these big vehicles, these things that could have much bigger windows if you wanted them
Yeah.
to have much bigger windows. And
I
they're just
guess
like,
they don't
no,
want
no,
the
no,
droids to be.
no. Yeah, we just want to have this tiny little viewport, but it's such an effortful vehicle. Like, and as the music cuts out, you can hear things like, um, you can hear the belts of that are propelling it forward. You can hear the little slips of on the sand. You can hear the rocks kind of crushing that little bit underneath it, and you can hear each little track on the belt just kind of like being slapped down almost on the sand. Like you can tell a lot by it. You can tell its age, that it's not exactly a new pristine showroom vehicle. Like uh, nothing sounds crisp or fresh. It all sounds like there's a little bit of wear and tear behind it. Um, there's gunk in the gears basically.
Mm, that's a much more detailed analysis of the sound than I was able to provide. I mean, I don't know enough about, I guess, mechanics to know what I'm matching sounds to. So even thinking about, you're right, like there's belts, um, and so you can hear the belts and the age of it. Can you tell what is powering the vehicle by the sound?
No, I can't. So you know how like there's certain like we know this from behind the scenes stuff. There's always that like George Lucas really liked hot rods and old cars and all of that sort of stuff. And like the Millennium Falcons, like it's an old hot rod, like it's a beaten up old hot rod. It's not
Mm-hmm.
finished being worked on. That the idea there. But like I get a vibe of kind of farming tractor equipment, from the sand crawler. Um, and I mean, look,
Oh.
I didn't grow up on a farm, so I have very limited experience around that kind of stuff. But I remember I have memories of going to them on school trips, and they'd always like, like climb up on the tractor, or they'd show like a demonstration of like the tractor, like driving around and lifting hay bales and all that sort of stuff. And it's got that
I
same
didn't
kind of
get that
quality.
education.
We I think maybe 4 or 5 times we went to some sort of farm in
What?
in school.
In
Yeah,
Australia?
yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
It's bizarre. Yeah, I know. Like, I think honestly though, I think like when you're like in really like primary school, like your first couple of years of school, it's like, yeah, let's go to places with animals and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's just fun. But like all the other times that we'd go to farms, I think it was just like, we're running it. We've left the actual excursion early. What's in the area? What's plan B? There's a there's a dairy farm that we have as a backup, and we just go there. But
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
getting
So
the like massive tractor vibes.
it's a massive. It is. It's the same kind of belt mechanism, isn't it? Um, and I just kind of imagine like those kinds of, or
Mm,
like a tank. So it's like there's
that's it.
tanks have got that kind of belt mechanism, and it's not tractor. I'm thinking like bulldozers.
Oh,
So like a bulldozer has that kind of belt mechanism, and it's got the scoop at the front and all that. And all of those types of like so
so
tractors, bulldozers, tanks, all those sorts of things, they need to be able to go over fairly harsh
Surfaces.
or surfaces and terrain, and like it's always dirty. They're dirty environments, so the mechanics inside need to probably, I would assume, allow for a whole bunch of crud to get in them. And like I feel like that you can hear that because everything, all the cogs and the gears sound rough.
You're also hearing like all the
It's not.
cargo shaking inside. Like,
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So they're carrying around a lot of stuff, a lot
and
of
yeah,
junk, and so yeah, that
and they
affects
haven't really
everything.
secured the droids inside either.
Nah, no. It's like when Threepio's in there and he's wandering around in the dark, he's like waddling, looking around, and there's like just junk everywhere, and there's like other droids just caught in like
Yes.
tangles of junk and mess. And I wonder, it's like, did they pick up some junk and then find half a working droid and just throw him on the pile? Or was he a perfectly working droid just wandering around like Threepio and they went over a couple too many bumps and now he's junk, like
They were like, maybe
I
someone will
wonder that.
buy it for parts or something.
Mm,
Or maybe there will be a
mm,
droid that we pick up who is a repair droid who will just magically repair the droids. Who knows?
yeah. Maybe we'll find the bottom half of this droid and like eventually put him together. But that's no, that becomes Darth Maul's legs, so no, I guess
Oh,
not.
that's so true. Darth Treadwell droid mall. Um, that's funny. So I did notice that we do see a tiny little window here. We do see like the light in the window, and I kind of imagine, the droids sitting around with hot chocolate inside, sort of
Yeah,
um, telling tales. Um, and next thing you know, we have this like clockwise wipe cut thing.
yep,
And then it's daytime in the desert. And now we are with the troopers, like stormtroopers, and
yep,
they are basically on the hunt for the droids. Notably, we hear
yep.
the Imperials motif. Do 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 do
Boom, boom.
do. Yep, and it's like very. We hear drums. We have like the timpani. It's very like it's ominous. It sounds ominous.
Mm. It's it's subtle though as well, isn't it? Like it's not booming in the scene.
Correct.
It's quite low in the background. And then does it cut off completely?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, because then we hear dewback noises,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's just a solo instrument that does the Imperials motif. So yeah, it's not like a full banging like instance of this track. It's really just once they play like I think it's like a trombone or something or a tuba maybe. I don't remember, but it's a low brass instrument solo just doing the motif. Do, 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 do. And then we have drums going like boom 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 boom.
Yep,
Dewbacks.
yep.
And then we
Yeah,
have
so
like
there's a shuttle that lifts off that's like quite loud in the scene in the background. And then
um,
you've got the troopers using the binocs and you see one that's wandering around on the dewback, and that I think so that's all special edition stuff.
okay. Was that not in the
And so I tend yeah, it wasn't in the so the dewbacks on that's all special edition. And I remember seeing that for the first time in the cinema. And like a lot of the special edition stuff, the stuff that they added, I feel like they put a little bit of extra emphasis on because like the shuttle that takes off in the back of that scene is quite a ways away, but you hear it quite loudly.
Yeah, okay, so the
Like
shuttle
it
wasn't in you're saying the shuttle was not in the original in the
no, no, it
Oh.
was just a bunch of stormtroopers walking around in sand. And I think the dewbacks in the original, someone might, I'm sure Star Wars, someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were static. I think it was like almost silhouette-y in the background over like on a horizon. I think there were just some silhouette-y cutouts almost of like I could be imagining that now. It's been so long. There's been more time with the special edition than there has been without it. So that like what the original was now. I've forgotten, basically.
Do you remember if the timing changed? Like, was music added, or sort of the static shot was
I
maybe
don't
replaced? Okay.
remember.
Okay. Someone recently hooked me up with the despecialized. I've never seen the despecialized. So I'm going, I'll be able to compare more so for the rest of
Yeah,
the season.
do.
But that's
I've got
interesting.
them on an old DVD set, but I haven't watched them. It's one of those things
It's
like, oh
more like
yeah,
you
yeah,
have it for
I'll get
reference.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, in case I ever feel like inconveniently finding the DVD and putting it in instead of just watching it on my Apple TV at an instant, It's like
Yeah,
I'm probably never gonna watch it.
that's a whole question about the soundtrack too, because I think people own different versions of the soundtrack, but the one that a lot of
Hmm.
people listen to is the one that is just on Spotify, even if they own
Yeah,
it. And that's just because streaming is so convenient. And I'm the same way.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Like I've got the special edition soundtracks, and I borrowed a DVD, an external DVD drive from a friend so that I could rip my CDs and sync it up so that I could listen to it in my Apple Music. Because I want the
That's not a bad
score
idea.
version, like not just the soundtrack version.
Okay, so this is
Is
a
that
little
am I
bit,
referring to it the right way? Like you've got the score version that's like the longer motifs, like in time, almost in time with the film,
mhm.
and then you've got like the soundtrack version where everything is tracks.
Yeah, this is like, I, I might do like a deep dive into this one day, because the terminology and like the various versions and ways to organize the music, there are just so many different ways to explain it and to conceive of it. And what you're kind of saying is right. I mean, but there is, different people have different definitions of score and soundtrack. So that makes it very complicated.
Yeah,
To me, if it's on an album, if it's a CD, it's a soundtrack album, period. To
yep,
me, the score
yep.
is this, and listeners feel free to disagree with me, but to me, the score is something that is not actually tangible. The score is like what it is, no matter what form it takes. And the closest representation of the score would be physically the musical score. That
Yeah,
would, to
yeah.
me, but the thing is, notice that it doesn't actually exist as like one cohesive bound score. I mean, maybe it does, but it really is like cue to cue. So the score to me is like something, it almost doesn't exist, because the recorded version, it's like a song, okay? If someone
Yep.
covers a song, like if I were to write a song, what is the song? The is it the piece of paper where I wrote down the song, or is it like the lyrics, or is it like
Mm,
the first recording that I make of the song, or is it like the definitive recording of the song? And then if I'm teaching the song to someone else, what is the song? So the song,
yep.
it's like something, it's
Yeah.
hard to, does that make any sense? Like,
Well, it's very philosophical. It's
yeah, and
very
that's why it's very
philosophical.
hard to nail down what exactly it
Yeah.
means, what exactly the score is. Because if it's on an album, that is, to
Mm,
me, that's not the score already. That's a soundtrack.
that's a
And
soundtrack. So maybe I'm thinking of the cuts of it then. The maybe I'm putting a definition and I'm using score and soundtrack where I should be maybe talking about the different, like there's a theatrical cut of the score, or there's recording of the score, and then there's the theatrical cut of it versus the uh, I don't know, what do you call it? The
yeah,
commercial cut,
okay, maybe this will be, maybe like, okay, if we
maybe.
take an extreme example, I don't think people will, I think this is a question a lot of people have. So I don't mind, like, yeah. So let's just get into it. Okay. So the most extreme example, I think, is like the version that's on Spotify, where it's like
Hmm.
the tracks, the things that appear on that album are very clearly out of order. Like,
Yeah, yeah, like you've got Leia's theme really early on,
yeah, it's
and
track 3, which is a lot of times track 3 is where you put like a track that you know is going to be a hit. And
mhm,
so it's kind of ordered to me like a commercial album, like to maybe not a Star Wars
mhm,
fan, but to someone who wants to, because when you release an album, a lot of the time, there's a lot of different philosophies of track order and whatever, but a lot of the time you think of like, you want the first 3 tracks to be solid, like tracks that are playable, that are catchy, that keep you listening. Like the first 3 tracks are everything. So Princess Leia's theme is the 3rd track, when really the first time that we like really hear her theme out in the open is on The Princess Appears, which they actually put toward the end of the album, which is something that happens early in the movie. So it's kind of confusing where these things are out of order, like in a very obvious way. And then there are versions of this, then there are editions of the soundtrack that more or less have the orders preserved a little bit more. But the thing is, it's hard to like exactly consolidate what we think of as a song or a theme into a track, since in the context of the movie, it might actually be broken up into a scene. It's like when you film a scene, you might cut it with other scenes in between and whatever. And so then for the people who make the soundtracks, which it's like a huge art and philosophy that different people will master and mix and conceive of the albums in different ways, and people take it very seriously. Like it's not just, I hear fans talk about it sometimes, like, oh, why didn't they just put it in order? Like, why didn't they just do it like this? But there's like all this stuff that goes behind why things are ordered a certain way, and it's not really that simple because, first of all, there are the mixes. Okay, for one thing, sometimes John Williams records a separate take meant for the movie and for the soundtrack. Even if it's the same piece of music, it'll be very slightly different timings. Most people will never notice, but to him, he might notice. And so he might, it might be the right order, but it might be like an alternate take. And then some people, when they want really exactly just what is on the sound, what is in the film, that's what they want, is just the exact order that it is in the film. Then you have to consider, like, do you also want it mixed the same way that it's in the film? Because when you're mixing the soundtrack to optimize it for the film, you're going to equalize the frequencies differently, like to leave space for dialogue. And it's not even like cutting things out, because micro edits are definitely also a thing. But I mean, you might cut out, whatever's at the 2K frequency, or like you might sort of, you know what I mean? You might just mix it in a different way because to make space for other stuff. So if you want the crystal clear audio that brings out more of the instrumentation and more of the quote unquote score, meaning this ephemeral concept of a song that John Williams wrote, then you might not want the film. You might want the crafted soundtrack album instead. Yes. Depends. What do you want? Yes. There's just so many philosophies surrounding it. So it's.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I okay. That all makes a lot of sense, and it's putting into words. I'll talk about something very lame but kind of practical. It's like if you're ever one of those people that tinker with your home audio, like the speakers that you have hooked up to your television and all that stuff. It's the thing that a lot of people don't necessarily maybe get why, but you configure a home theater and then try to play music through it. And oftentimes you have to change things like EQ and all that sort of stuff when you're playing music through a home theater setup, because they're tuned differently. Your EQs for movies are different. Mm-hmm. Your EQs for music are different. When you play things, and this is really me just dumbing down something into a super practical way. So
that's okay. Actually,
I've experienced
a specific example comes up in these minutes. So we will I will have an example of something that sounds different on the soundtrack to the album. And I mean, I'll let listeners be the judge to like what they think is more valuable to hear. So, but continue, please.
Yeah. No, it's something that, like, for a while I didn't kind of get it, and then I was like, oh, of course, like, yeah, you're listening to something that's been optimized for a multitude of different frequencies and sounds to be happening at the same time when you're watching a film. So then you throw music through it, and oftentimes it can feel hollow, doesn't feel quite right. And if you just take that musical score then and listen to it on speakers that are designed just for music, it doesn't quite sound right. And that's probably why when they release the what I'm calling the theatrical versions of soundtracks, they have to go through a complete remastering process because of what you just said. They don't just take the track and put it out and say, there you go, there's the theatrical versions, because it would sound, people would listen to it and go, huh? It doesn't sound quite right. They have to change all the levels, remaster, re-equalize it, and put it out so that it sounds good on musical reproduction equipment.
Yeah, and also I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes because I can't remember off the top of my head what the episode is called, but before, like especially in the 70s, in the 70s, this would have been a prime time also for just the recording technology. It's actually kind of tough to preserve it, and so in these new editions that have been coming, by new I mean like all of the editions that keep coming out of even Star Wars or even old soundtracks, like people, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of like guesswork and technology, and also just fighting against time and like the way that the original tape has been able to be preserved. And a lot of the times there's already so much degradation. It takes quite a bit of effort to boost certain things and to sort of get it right, to digitize those things and go through this whole thing. But anyway, there's this great episode on David Collins's podcast that is about, I think, the mastering process of soundtracks. I'll put a link in the show notes because that episode definitely gave me a new appreciation for what it takes to preserve an old record, like some of these really historic films and film scores, and including Star Wars, because 77, the technology was, it's nowhere near where it is today.
Yeah. Magnetic tape, wasn't it?
I'm not really sure, but all I know is that it sounds like a really rough process to, like, I'm grateful to the people who make it, their life's work to preserve that. Yeah.
It's no exaggeration either. It's years of work. Like, it's not something that they do in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it's even like compounded by the fact that people don't really buy music anymore, so it's actually hard to fund that. Like a lot of the times when they make these things, they're not really making that much money on releasing a new soundtrack edition. People are just going to stream it anyway. It's so that's why it's a whole thing is, yeah. But anyway, okay. So moving on. I'm glad you brought that up though. So we are in the Stormtrooper land, and this string swell thing is sort of seared in my memory, and it goes into the timpani, and we pan to the Stormtrooper in the forefront, and he says, "Someone was in the pod. The tracks go off in this direction." And then we hear what to me sounds like a precursor to the Imperial March, which the Imperial March proper, and I mean, doesn't appear till The Empire Strikes Back, but already in A New Hope, there are many like precursors to it, in my opinion, harmonically. So we kind of get this like, and that's kind of it. And you'll hear that if you have if you have whatever version of this soundtrack album that has the track Mouse Robot and Blasting Off, you'll hear it on that very briefly. And yeah, it sounds like almost like the beginning of the Imperial March. But it's just this first
couple notes.
So that's fun.
Yeah. That stuff in Michael Giacchino's work on Rogue One, that stuff came to a lot of forefront sort of conversation about this, because people were a bit like, oh, where's the Imperial March? And a lot of people didn't realize that, like until you say it to them. It's like, yeah, there's no Imperial March until The Empire Strikes Back. There's all these like little precursors, and sometimes I think his score for Rogue One was almost a little too clever in some respects, because a lot of those little cues and hints and whatnot just flew right by people. It certainly flew right by me when I listened to it. I was like, where's all the like I didn't hear things until someone pointed it out and said, oh yeah, there's a reference here, there's a reference there, and all that. And I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, that one quotes the motif more, or that
Mm,
one quotes the
yeah.
motif. Yeah, the one that we get earlier in this scene. I can't remember. What is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, that is that's a good point, and it's like I back to Princess Leia being track 3 is like Imperial on the sort of on the new remastered edition of A New Hope soundtrack. The Imperial March is sort of seared in our memory as one of the Star Wars greatest hits, and so because Star Wars is something a lot of us experience like all as one thing because it's not we just know all of it. I mean everything that's come out so far.
Mm,
We just like know all the movies already. So we're not really feeling the passage of time of like, oh, this one hasn't come up yet, or it's just like for me as a fan who came into the fandom the fandom. It wasn't really a fandom when I was in elementary school, but the first thing I saw was Return of the Jedi. So I already inherited this whole thing that came before. So
yeah.
I just didn't really, I personally didn't get to experience like the new themes developing. It's like I already knew quote unquote Darth Vader's theme already, like way at the
Yeah.
beginning. And a lot of people are in that boat. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's have you ever had uh the ability to watch Star Wars for the first time with someone who's never seen it?
yes, my brother and I did it with his girlfriend in machete order.
Yep. Yep. And how did she pick up on things because of the music
I
that
don't
you
remember,
wouldn't maybe necessarily otherwise think of?
not to my knowledge, but I would be interested again. Have you ever done that?
Yeah. And that's why I brought it up because I did that with a friend and so we did chronological order.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
and so like complete chronological order and
You mean not release order? You mean like literally like episode 1
yeah,
and then
one,
2?
two, three, four,
Oh
five,
my
six, seven. Yeah,
gosh.
yeah. So we did it that way, and it made me realize you get really hung up on. So in deciding which way to do it, I was just like, well, no, I'm going to do it in episode order, just because it's linear. It's the easiest way to understand the story. I think if you just keep it linear. Um,
Debatable.
and like you bring it up with people and they say, no, you got to do it in release order because then the reveal of Darth Vader being Luke's dad. And it's like, everyone knows that. That's so burnt. It's like some aspects of the music, it's burnt into the zeitgeist, and it doesn't matter who the person is or whether they've seen Star Wars or not. They know that fact already. So you're not you're not saving anything special. I don't think you're saving anything special for them by making a new person watch it in release order unless they're a small child and they haven't grown up around any popular media.
I disagree with you, but I see
Well,
your
well,
point.
I only have the one example of it, but so we did that because I checked. I asked my friend. I said, "Okay, do you know what do you know?" And she knew. She knew that Luke was the son of Vader. She knew that. Never seen any of it. So when we were watching it in chronological order, we get to episode 2, and the Sand People. After the Sand People scene, she's like, "That's Darth Vader," and I
Oh,
went,
that's interesting.
"Ah, it's in the music." Because there's the very subtle
Oh,
Imperial
yep.
March
Hmm.
plays in episode 2, and you get so focused on things like story points and plot points and all these things. It's like you're going to reveal that, and oh, you got to say that, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and that sometimes is at odds with the release order and the music being out of sync in that sense, because Williams put cues from you know episodes 5 and 6 into the prequels,
Mm-hmm.
so you hear them earlier than was kind of intended originally, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that thing that was like, oh yep, cool, eventually she'll figure out that Anakin becomes Darth Vader in episode 3, that just went, oh, in episode 2, like a whole movie earlier, just figured it out.
It's
And
very perceptive of her.
yeah, and the music for Palpatine as well.
Mm-hmm.
That and also like his chin. I mean, he's walking
I was
around,
gonna
going
say,
blah 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 blah. It's like kind of obvious to an adult
yeah,
that that's Palpatine.
that, yeah. It's I recently found old fan boards that were like people speculating back in the 90s whether the senator would end up, or like whether Palpatine would end up becoming uh, Emperor Palpatine. It's really hilarious to go back in time. And they're like, well, I guess we'll find out. The next movie's coming out soon. Guess half of us will have to eat our words. There was like all this debate of like, no, that's not going to be the reveal. Oh, it's too obvious. It's going to be
That's
something
great.
else. It's really
It's
priceless.
it's
Highly
too
recommend.
obvious because of his name. I mean, he has the same name, and, and his name existed in canon. Like the toys, Emperor Palpatine, and I think
Actually,
we
that is
knew
something
that
I
at
learned from the
least.
threads is like some of them
Yeah,
were like, oh, well, the toys just dropped. And, well, yeah.
yeah.
That's really funny though. So anyway, here we have a precursor to the Imperial March, and the other trooper pops up from below, which I think is a really funny like way to enter the shot. And he's like, "Look, sir, droids," and so he's holding
Yeah.
something in his hand, and then we get a little wipe cut. I don't know what it's called when it's like the little circle in the middle and it kind of grows. I don't know if it's a wipe cut
It's
actually.
either
It's
an
like
iris. It's either an wipers
it's
left
like
to
an
right
yeah, you're
or
right.
right
It's
to
like an
left.
opposite.
If it's coming from the center and expanding outwards to reveal new footage from the middle,
I
is
think
that?
so. Is that Iris?
Yeah, I think that's an iris
Okay.
wipe
Okay.
or iris cut or something like that. So it goes
Yeah.
whoop, like that. Yeah,
So
I
that
think
thing.
that's an iris.
So that thing. And then we're back to the Jawa transport in the daylight. And here we have some oom-pahs.
Yeah, the Oompa Loompa music. That's what I had
Oh,
in my
I
notes.
wasn't
It's
even
just
thinking Oompa Loompas, but oom-pah is just sort of like the thing I think musicians just call when it's like a oom-pah,
Oompa. Oom.
oom-pah. So it's like,
Yeah.
I wrote notes down, but I wrote it not in notation, so I don't know what was I doing? Anyway, it's oompas. It's associated with the Jawa theme.
Yeah.
It's what we hear before the actual like melody comes in.
Yep.
And
Dun,
if
dun,
people are
dun.
following along on Frank Lehman's complete catalog of the musical themes of Star Wars, he calls this the diminutive creatures incidental motif. So just like it's sort of and he writes it's a cute staccato vamp used both for the Jawas and Ewoks, which I actually think is interesting
Huh.
how similar the Jawa music is to Ewok music.
I didn't realize.
I mean, I guess from a certain point of view, to me, they're similar. To me, they both sound cute, and to me, they both sound a little bit playful. They both have these oompas, and they both have like dotted. They're called like dotted rhythms to them, sort of, which is sort of like when the notes, the rhythm of the notes, they're not even. It's not like da 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 da. It's more like da 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 da.
Yep.
And so I think it's interesting how, I mean, it just shows sort of how John Williams is sort of conceiving of these creatures and how, when he's scoring Jawas, clearly it evoked something similar in his own, mind as when he was scoring
Mm.
Ewoks.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the Ewok theme because I didn't realize that there was a similarity there. Um, and also, when you said oom-pahs, and it's like, oh wait, hold on, that's the term?
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that? Okay, that there's the gears turning in my head as you said it, and I'm going, oh wait, the music is reminding me of the Oompa Loompas, and the musical term is called Oompa. Oh, that's
And as you
oh
said
god,
that, I was
that's
like, oh
cool.
yeah, this worked for Oompa Loompas too. I guess guess
Yeah,
that's all of their headspace, which is, I mean, I won't say is like good or bad, but it is revealing of what their lens is.
yeah,
And I think it's interesting how, like, to me, the playful nature of the music, not to downplay the drama that the droids are going through at the moment and how, scared Threepio in particular is, but the music to me sort of signifies, or it kind of lets me know as a viewer that even though what they're going through is kind of bad right now, it's in the grand scheme not going to be like it. This is sort of just like an
yeah.
adventure of the day. Like they'll get out of it.
Yes,
It's kind of,
yeah, that's
it kind
right.
of downgrades the severity level.
Yeah. Well, the last time we saw, so the opening of the scene, that was the big dun 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 dun, and it's tense, and it's like, what's gonna, there's that uncertainty and tenseness, and then if you were to remove the Stormtrooper scene and just cut from Sandcrawler to Sandcrawler scene, the tone, it's a big tonal shift. Like
Hmm.
that, it does. It goes from tense and severe to um, quite, yeah, upbeat and kind of a little wacky in a sense. Yeah, like you said, this is just going to be a little adventure for them, and what there's curiosity, I think, in the music.
I think that's a good word, and
Like,
it goes along with the dialogue because I think they're like amping up the humor here, right? Like
yep,
3PO and R2, um, and sort of with the physical humor too, like R2's, you know, he like bangs on his head, his dome, and then we see like the
yep,
droids like all these droids kind of squawking and sort of like, the gonk droids kind of like the transport's opening.
yeah,
Like the whole thing is sort of, I don't know what it's called, like cute physical humor almost. Like you see these droids awkwardly
yep.
bouncing around and moving and everything.
It's so the note I had about that scene. So when the sandcrawler opens and they start they're taking their wares out, as the Jawas are taking all their junk and their droids out, and the music shifts a little bit away from like just the dum 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 dum, and it sort of sounds kind of like if you're watching a movie and someone goes to like this exotic bazaar, like a bazaar sort of
Mm-hmm,
marketplace,
mm-hmm.
somewhere, in the desert or whatever. It reminds me of something like that, like you might see it in an Indiana Jones movie, um, but it would be played seriously in that movie as like, look at the exotic location. But in this context, it's like, yeah, you're in this vacant desert, and here are these little creatures almost doing like a car boot sale, just opening up their vehicle and pulling their junk out and like going, yep, here you go. Here's all our stuff, and they're pushing some of their droids along. They're struggling to move in the sand, and it's very haphazard.
Yeah. Are you talking about like, okay, so they're opening the thing and then we have this, it's an ascending like woodwind melody. It's like, dee, 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 and then it's like, dee, dee, dee,
Yep,
dee, 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 dee.
that's it.
Yeah.
Yep,
That's right.
yeah,
Okay, so that happens like as 3PO is like, don't shoot, don't shoot. And then
yep.
it goes like, dee, 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 and he's like, will this ever end? Dee, 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 dee. Yeah, totally.
That's the
That is
one.
that
That
is called the Sandcrawler motif, according to this thematic catalog. Sort of,
Yep,
yeah, which it's not an official like name, but it often is associated with the Sandcrawler, and so, um,
yeah,
yeah, that's a good description of it. Um,
It's very cool. Like I honestly, I could imagine almost two angles of that, you know. I could imagine like if you just focused on, so I kept the music sort of similar. I could imagine if people were coming to shop there and you kept the camera and the perspective only on them, and they were just, you know, these people coming along and they'd be like coming along looking at all these things and being like, oh, look how quaint this is, and you know, oh, look at that and look at that. But we're not seeing it from that perspective yet. We're seeing it purely from the perspective of these poor droids that are being put on display to be sold, you know, and like so everything's a little bit off about the music to me in that scene. Like nothing's uh yeah, there's nothing big or grand about it. It's all very very kind of it's very kind of slap. There's a slap togetherness of it that I get from the music and what I'm seeing on screen.
Sort of like their ad hoc
Yeah,
little storefront.
yeah, yeah,
It's sort
yeah.
of like
Sorry if I'm not. Yeah,
this whole thing sort of reminds me of like the ice cream truck coming to your neighborhood with its
yeah,
like
yeah. The
little ice
broken
cream,
recording. It's kind of like
and then it
crackling.
kind
It's
of
not
like
quite.
because I one thing I noticed that I don't think I fully appreciated before, like this week when I was like studying the scene, how they just totally park at the Lars homestead. Like it's not like not
Yeah,
I mean not that there are too many like central places right near the Lars homestead, but I didn't realize how close by they didn't really have to go out that far to go find droids. They just had to
no.
like go outside, wait for the ice cream truck to come,
Yeah, it is just like
and
the
it's
ice.
just right there.
I hadn't even thought of that.
They're just right there. You see they park, and then you just see in the same shot in the background, you see the top of the homestead, like the dome, and you see them walking
Yep,
out
yep.
when it's so close. It's so yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. I found
I
that really
hadn't
funny.
realized that. Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put it. I had not considered that at all. It is. It is. It's like
Yeah,
they pulled up literally on their lawn.
and they take
You
all
know,
the
it's just
droids
like the
out
cook.
for
Yeah.
like this one family.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
Wow.
and maybe neighbors, but
Well, door-to-door sales was a big thing back then. Like you don't get door-to-door sales the way that you used to in the like the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s. Like there was a lot of door-to-door salespeople. So I guess it's like that, isn't it? It's like someone
oh,
just
that's interesting.
turning up with their big case, you know, like
Yeah.
my grandfather sold vacuum cleaners door to door as one of his jobs. And you know,
Whoa.
and he'd have to do that thing where he had the big case with a vacuum in it, and he'd have to turn up to, you know, someone's house and get them to let him in, and you know, like they need to open it up and set it all up and start vacuuming their rugs for them.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's funny because there is a droid that looks very much like a vacuum cleaner to me.
Huh.
It,
Yeah.
it's just I wonder what the design team was thinking of when they're putting all these droids in the transport because there are some
Oh,
really funny
no.
designs. And I did notice that there's like one design that has like there's one droid that has like this neon green on it, and it seems like the
Yeah.
Jawas really like that one. Like I feel like they think that one's going to be a good seller. It's
Is that
very
the
tall.
dome? Oh, the
Uh,
very tall one. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I think it's like black with neon green on it. I don't know. It's
Yep.
yeah. Um.
Wonder what that thing does. I'm sure there's a Wikipedia
Oh
article
yeah.
about what that particular
I'm
droid
sure it
does.
does something.
It's an ice cream vendor or an ice maker or
Yeah.
something like that. Something like, hey, we're in the desert. They'll love this. They'll love
Yeah.
this.
So
Huh.
I'm gonna play a clip, and this is one of the parts that is seared in my memory with the dialogue, and let's see, I'm gonna play it first and let listeners try to fill in before I say what the dialogue is. So, do you know?
Luke,
Yeah.
Luke. Is that the tell your Uncle Owen if he gets a droid to be sure it speaks Bocce or something?
Exactly. That is exactly what it is. And for me, it's like the strings leading up into it is really I don't know, for maybe it's because I'm a string player myself, but just like the shape of it is like, and then it jumps immediately to, and those are sort of they're like basically they're different keys, and the string part, I think it's, I mean, this is completely subjective. And maybe it's just because I love Star Wars, so I'm primed to like it, like this part. But I feel like it's a very like elegant transition into the Force theme, even though it's sort of it's almost like a non sequitur into the Force theme. And I'll play it again, but like you have to like right before that is when we have more Jawa stuff. Like it's like dee 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 dee, and then. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like little, it's like different building blocks being put one after another, but like there's the linking between them really works for me. And it's also seared in my mind with Luke, tell Uncle if he gets a translator, be sure it speaks Bocce.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's that's our first sighting of Luke, and I don't know. There's something very homely about that version of the Force theme. You know, I mean,
It's not
obviously
even,
it's at the homestead.
it's see what I think is really funny. Okay, you just said Force theme. It's the main theme, but
Yeah.
in my head, I had written it down as the Force theme as well until I was
Yeah.
like, wait, that's actually not the Force theme. The Force theme is
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
but the way that it was
Yeah, that's right.
orchestrated, like it did take me a while to be like, oh wait, that's not the Force theme. That's that's the main theme. But it just sounds so different when it's not presented as like do 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 do, like in the
You're right.
huge way that it normally is. So what you just said, where this is like definitely a very homespun version of the main title.
Yeah. Is it played in French? Is that a French horn?
I think I'm like not really good at brass. I think it's trumpet, but
Okay.
it might be French
It's
horn.
maybe, yeah.
It's in a very
Oh,
sweet spot of the
whatever it
range.
is.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that might be that might be something that confused. You might be right. It might be French horn because the Force theme is famously like on the French horn in Binary
Yeah.
Sunset.
When you
So
first Binary Sunset, yeah. And maybe that's why I'm confusing it.
yeah, because the
Yeah.
orchestration I think can tell us, like, that's a whole layer that sometimes doesn't get talked about when we think about the music of Star Wars in terms of just the themes. Because sort of like with score and with song, what is the theme? It's how
Mm-hmm.
would you tell someone what the theme is? It's like telling someone a story. Everyone's going to tell it in a slightly different way, but still there's the sense that there is a story or there is a theme. But here, the melody of it is definitely the main title, and the orchestration of it is reminiscent of the Force theme.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a very, I don't know, it's like just one of my favorite parts for whatever reason. I'm going to play it
Mm.
again and fill in the dialogue. And this time, pay attention to the very tail end of the clip. Luke, tell Uncle if he gets a translator, be sure it speaks Bocce. Doesn't look like we have much of a choice, but I'll remind him. So what I'm hearing there at the end is... Did you hear that?
Yeah. Yeah, on strings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a couple things. First of all, that's the DS Irae motif. Or I wouldn't even call it a Star Wars motif. It's the DS Irae motif as heard in thousands of scores and used selectively in Star Wars when often to hint at something ominous, to sort of foretell something. And I think the homespun version of the Force theme, or see, it's not the Force theme, it's the main theme. Jeez.
Yes,
the homespun version, I really like the way that you phrased it. It's like the homespun, like that's so perfect. The homespun version of the main theme, first of all, it ends in a very, like before the DS Irae part, the cadence of it is sort of drawn out, the way it's like, it's sort of like a very like drawn out ending where it's very tender in that way, but then it's very softly. It's like you think it's over, but if you listen very carefully, and you can barely hear this in the film, it's like very subtle. And yeah, I don't know if you were able to hear that in the film, because I can barely hear it in the film. I can only hear it like...
You can barely hear it. Yeah. So the drawn out ending of the main theme, when I say like it's the homespun or the homestead version of it, why, I don't know why I get this, but I get this sort of visualization of it. You could almost imagine if it was like a family ties kind of, 70s or 80s family TV show. That would be the opening credits of the show, and that drawn out bit would be the wide shot of the house with the slow zoom towards the front door, and the names of the producers and showrunners or director being the final things that they have to make that few extra seconds for, just to say dun dun, and then it's the zoom into the door, and just as you're zooming into the door of the home, that's when that Dies Irae starts to be like, oops, something's gonna go awry at this house.
That is
And
perfect. I need someone to do an edit
that's
of
my
this.
visualization of it.
I love that. I think I'm catching on to what your proposition is. I'm just imagining this. I wonder now this makes me want to rewatch the holiday special and to see how they like go into the family home and everything. Yeah, I'm definitely imagining like going into the Lars homestead now. With the credits and with like everything. Someone walks through the door, and that's when the Dies Irae kind of fades out into the first line or whatever. That's really funny.
Well, you've got a kitchen scene, you've got a breakfast scene, you've got all these different things that happen, in the homestead, and so you could make just like a family sitcom, but it's not even a sitcom because there's nothing really all that funny. But you could make a family show, family drama version of the Lars homestead. And there's probably it's a good 20 minutes there. So, you add commercial breaks in, you've probably got one whole episode of the Larses or something.
Yeah. I'm very charmed by this. So thank you. Thank you for that. So that kind of puts a spin on the Dies Irae thing. And going back full circle to what we were talking about earlier with the soundtrack versions is, well, a lot of people would consider being able to hear a Dies Irae in the soundtrack. And once I don't know if you're priorly familiar with Dies Irae or if listeners are, but if it's like once you know what Dies Irae sounds like, you start to hear it in random things, even when it's out of context. Sort of like if you've ever been to Disneyland, there's this practice of spotting the hidden Mickey. So hearing a Dies Irae in a Star Wars film, is something is so common, but in specific places, but usually you miss it. So to spot it, what I'm saying is like kind of an exciting event. You know, you'd be like, it's something definitely like I would tweet about, like, did you hear the Dies Irae at the end? And sometimes I joke about it. Like I joke about how there's kind of a Dies Irae in the main theme, but I wouldn't actually consider it a Dies Irae. It's just the collection of 4 notes can show up out of context on accident without it being a Dies Irae, just because it's just 4 common notes, you know? But anyway, the fact that you can't appreciate it fully on in the film, but you can on the soundtrack, does bring the question of like, as a Star Wars fan, would you, listeners, prefer to watch the movie and kind of miss the Dies Irae unless you had a really good sound system? Or would you rather listen to the soundtrack version where it's mixed out in the open and so you can very clearly hear the Dies Irae just like it is here? And I'll play it for one last time where you can hear it so clearly here. And if you want to go in the film, I'll tell you the time code of where this happens. It is, well, the string line, like this Bocce section, is around, okay, it's 2:09 into our 5-minute clip. So that means if this starts at 15:01, so it's like, that would be like 17:09 or something into the film. Okay, so go back to that. And after Aunt Beru and Luke have that little exchange, tell me if you can hear it. Maybe on some editions you can, you know, there's also a lot of film editions too. But on the soundtrack, I feel like it's definitely more clear, and I can appreciate that more from a musical perspective on the soundtrack. So I'll try that part. So, yeah.
Super subtle.
Yeah.
Super subtle.
Definitely.
I wonder if you could have even heard that back in the day, you know, like the old VHS versions of it. Who had like most people were listening to or watching the movies on TVs that had mono reproduction
Yeah, that's what I'm
of the
learning.
sound as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I bet it was.
there was no stereo. You had a stereo TV. It's like, whoa, 2 speakers. What?
I bet that was really hard to hear, which is also brings again back to this central question of which is the definitive sound based version, like soundtrack version of things. It also kind of depends on your philosophy regarding whose vision you want to experience more, the director or the composers. Because a lot of the times, and I just a couple months ago, I saw John Williams in concert for the first time, and it was very interesting because he was conducting music from Star Wars, among other things, but I was definitely able to hear different things in his conducting. And it did occur to me that also when he puts, you know, all this time and energy and sort of like maybe loves this track, this, you know, part of the score, this cue that he's done, he doesn't himself have control over like how it ends up in the final mix or what gets, you know, edited out or what gets really, really lowered. So like as a composer who put the Dies Irae in this, definitely I would say on purpose, because it also shows up in like the unused binary sunset cue, which we're in a couple episodes from this one. It's already been recorded. There's a huge binary sunset breakdown episode. So look out for that, everyone. But in that episode, we go through also the alternate binary sunset cue that was, you know, what John Williams' first pass, and that definitely has a lot of Dies Irae in it. So for that to be cut out of the film, or like you can barely hear it in the film, the soundtrack is often a time for listeners to be able to hear the full scope of what John Williams wrote. It's sort of like reading, you know, have you ever read like a novelization of a film that maybe has some parts of the script that couldn't make it in there? It's kind of like, that is also a consideration, you know, when picking which version to listen to. It's like, do you want the extended version basically? that has the fuller music and maybe in a different order before things were changed, and I think personally, what I want would just depend on what mood I'm in or like what I'm feel like. I don't land on like one definitive side, because on one hand, I feel very like I like to know what just made it into the final film, and sometimes I do want the extras, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So moving on to the next, not really scene, but here's when Luke walks up to the station, the ice cream station, the droid ice cream truck, and there's no music at this point. So here, actually, for quite a long stretch, there's no music. It's really the sound of it's really the dialogue, the sound of the droids, the Jawas speaking. That's really what's in the forefront. And here we have the Jawa speaking really quickly, and Owen, I don't know, it either sounds like he understands the Jawa perfectly or is completely disregarding what he's saying. Because the Jawa is speaking super fast, and Owen's just like, yeah, we'll take the red one. No, not that one.
Yeah, Owen's like, he's not very polite. Let's put it that way. He's that
He's
guy.
brusque.
I think Owen, definitely he is. I think he's that guy like that goes overseas on a holiday and is just like, yeah. Like, don't worry, I'll haggle. I'll haggle, like he doesn't haggle in this scene, but I could imagine him. Like I could imagine almost a longer cut where he's just like, yeah, how much do you want for it? No, I'm gonna give you like a quarter of that much. Like but he's not a very good haggler. He throws it out there. They go no, and then he's just like, I don't have time for that.
Like he tries to put on the
All
attitude,
right.
but he doesn't have like,
Yeah.
he caves like, and
Yeah,
here and here
let's take the red one.
and here then he like goes up to C-3PO and he doesn't ask like what he can do. It's like he's almost testing him. He's like, I suppose you're programmed for etiquette and protocol. Protocol? Why, it's my primary function, sir. I'm well versed in all the customs. I have no need for a protocol droid. It's like, why even ask? Well,
yeah, he's a Twitter user. He's definitely someone that you would meet on Twitter. It's just like, why are you engaging in this conversation if you already know the answer? That's Owen Lars.
but it occurs to me that I'm not really sure how expensive droids are. Like the setup, like it seems like a big deal, right? To me, it feels, maybe it's just because to me, C-3PO and R2-D2 are like obviously so special and so useful. Like it must be a big investment to get a droid. So like on that level, I understand like if you want to throw, like basically if this was C-3PO's test, 3PO nailed it with flying colors. Like he answers him and then he quickly pivots to, he answers him very directly. I mean, this dialogue is really great. I have no need for a protocol droid. Of course you haven't, sir. Not in an environment such as this. That is why I have been programmed. What I really need is a droid who understands the binary language of moisture evaporators. Evaporators? Sir, my first job was programming binary load lifters, very similar to your evaporators in most respects. Can you speak Bocce? Of course I can, sir. It's like a second language to me. Yeah, all right, shut up. I'll take this one. And the thing is, like, 3PO is the perfect droid for this. 3PO doesn't 3PO is good at following directions, and unfortunately when people treat him like that, he is fine with, like, he's used to it. He's used to that. And he can answer directly, and he is honestly, he's like a genius. Like he's programmed for a lot of functions, basically. He can do etiquette and protocol, but he can also do all this other stuff. And so he's he's quite a steal. He's quite a bargain. Who wouldn't want 3PO?
Oh, he's a huge bargain. Huge bargain. I mean, did you know that he was made by the Darth Vader? I mean, like, that's got to have some value. They didn't even check the plate, that says who made him, like, like one of those like special cars
but
that
are he didn't have plates.
Hand assembled by a Ferrari mechanic in Italy. It's like he's surely 3PO's got his little plate that says, like, hand assembled by Anakin.
Well, but maybe the person who put plates on him, since it wasn't Anakin, right? Yeah, someone finished 3PO.
Right. Yeah, he didn't.
So the person who finished 3PO maybe stole Anakin's work and wrote their name on it. They're like, damn, this is a good droid. Whoever made this.
Where's the Disney Plus show about that? I
I'm
like
sure it's in a comic or something. I'm sure people
droid
know who
clother.
finished Threepio.
I'll ask the guys from Broaxium. Anytime I
Oh,
have a question about comics, I either send a message to Alex Damon or the guys from Broaxium. But it's usually like the if it's a comic related thing, I always jump in Google Chat. I did it just yesterday. I'm like, "Hey, comic nerds, tell me this," and within seconds, they'll just be like, "Oh no, this didn't happen in the comics." It's like,
that is a really good
excellent.
idea. I had Alex
Yeah.
on last season on a set of minutes that had a lot of like battle and ships happening. Yeah, and I was
Yeah.
basically like, what are all the different TIE fighters and stuff?
Like, well,
Yeah.
well,
Well,
are
because I
you
know you
reading
have
from
a
the
video
list?
on that, so
No.
yeah. So he takes 3PO and goes, Luke, take these two over to the garage, will you? I want them cleaned up before dinner. And then famous line, but I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Power converters.
And then just the way Owen says, you can waste time with your friends when your chores are done. You can waste time with your...
Is it just me?
It sounds very 70s. That's what I keep saying about the Larses.
Yeah. And I don't know. Every time I see that, the actor that played Owen Lars, I feel like he's not. I feel like he doesn't deliver that line like he's even taking it very seriously. I get a similar vibe from his line delivery there as I do from Ewan McGregor saying, killed younglings, like covering his mouth a little bit when he's like I get that same kind of like he's finding this funny vibe from that
He's like,
actor, like he's
line, what are
half
they called again?
smiling.
Younglings? Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
he, Now it's serious, you've got to deliver it, like this is a bad thing. It's like killed he killed younglings. Like how many out I'm sure there's outtakes of that, but
But yeah,
yeah, the
waste
Owen
time with your
Lars actor,
friends.
I'm
I'm like,
sure.
wait, is this my parents talking?
Waste time with your friends. Yeah.
Waste time with your friends when your homework is done. Now, come on.
Picking up power converters. Oh God.
Then, all right, come on. Or he's like, come on. Like, I don't know. I like the way that he says that. He's like, come on. I don't
Yeah.
know. I can't imitate Luke very well, but anyway, and the red one, come on. Where he's like annoyed and he's like, I don't want to do this. But he's still like pretty nice to the droids. Like he's still like,
Yeah.
he's like the child in the situation with his uncle, but then he can still take charge of the droids when being
Yep.
asked to do
Yep.
that. So I think that's actually quite responsible of him. So
Yep.
come on, Red, let's go. And then explosion. Uncle Owen.
Yep.
Yeah. This R2 unit has a bad motivator. Look. Hey, what are you trying to push on us? Another Owen haggling
And that Jawa
moment.
just goes like, what? Like that. I love that Jawa there. He's like, what are you trying to push on us? He's like, what? I love it.
And then 3PO, again, what a steal. 3PO knows exactly what to do. Excuse me, sir, but that R2 unit is in prime condition. A real bargain. So 3PO is the secret haggler this whole time.
Yeah.
He's the...
Yep. Yeah. He's in control of the sale.
Totally. And then he controlling the force sensitive. Uncle Owen, what about that one? Wonder who gave you that idea, Luke.
Yeah. Yep.
And then
He's
here we
such an
get...
easy mark.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
That is so funny. Luke is a really easy mark. And it's
yeah,
ironic
Luke would
that then he
buy
later becomes yeah.
if Luke was walking into a retail store, he would walk out with the aftermarket extended warranties on every product, the store credit card, like that's Luke. It'd be like, wait, so it's better value if I sign up for the credit card? It's like, yeah, we'll give you a free t-shirt. And
It's
it's
like
like, oh, all
a
right.
free power converter every month.
Yeah, yeah. What's the interest rate? You don't need to know the interest rate on this. Don't worry, Luke. It's fine. You can afford it.
So here finally we have a tiny bit of music, but it's just light underscore, so it's not really out above anything else. It's just a little bit underneath. It's what about that blue one? We'll take that one. And then you'll be very pleased with that one, sir, 3PO says. He really is in first-class condition. I've worked with him before. Here he comes. Which that line, to me, reminds me of Here They Come.
Yep.
But anyway, then, okay, and then 3PO, who can be like a really polite emissary. I think it's funny because we're seeing all these different characters in different levels of their relationships to others, if you know what I mean. Like, we're seeing them pivot in their countenance and like basically in their role when they're talking to different people. There's actually a lot of complexity in that sense, like in this little scene with these characters that, some will say that their deliveries are cheesy or whatnot, but there is like directorially, like I feel like we are seeing a lot of different levels. So then of course 3PO talking to R2, a completely different tone, Now don't you forget this. Why I should stick my neck out for you is quite beyond my capacity. And then R2 does this whistle, and I wrote like it's a whistle raspberry. It's like a whistle, and then it's like a or something.
Yeah.
And then
what I love about that line is how starkly contrasted what 3PO says about R2 in that scene is to when R2's run off. It's like, oh yeah, this one's in tip-top condition. Yeah, I've worked with him before. And later on, he's like, oh, that
he's
droid,
always getting into
I
trouble.
can't trust him. Oh, he's trouble, nothing but trouble. It's like,
protocol and etiquette. I mean, a lot of that stuff is fake.
Yeah.
Let me just say. So.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So we're in the final 20 seconds of this 5-minute clip, and so finally we're inside. We're in the garage, in Luke's room, in Luke's garage, I guess.
Yeah.
In the homestead, no music still, and the part that is here that you love.
Yeah.
Thank the maker. This oil bath is going to feel so good. So good.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And the other thing that stands out just before that line is Luke doing the thing that every young adult male is doing. He's playing with a toy ship and he's like, like.
Love that.
Yeah, I love it too. I love it too because like, yeah, I don't know. It says a lot about Luke.
And it foreshadows like a ship that we'll see later. So I think that's really cool. And yeah, it's just like Luke being a kid is something that as he gets progressively more Jedi, we see less and less of.
Yeah.
And I sort of feel like we don't see that again until The Last Jedi, which is why I like The Last Jedi. But yeah, I think I cherish those moments where Luke can sort of be a kid and sort of have fun and do stuff like that. So 3PO descends into the oil bathtub that Luke just happens to have in his garage.
Yep.
And he says, I've got such a bad case of dust contamination I can barely move, which I like. The world building that has led up to this is really great because for the past 10 minutes, intermittently, 3PO has been complaining about his joints. He's like, my joints are frozen, and we've been hearing them too, really loudly as he moves. Yep. So honestly, ever since you enlightened me that this is an oil bath and not just this old bath, this old bath.
Yep. This old bath.
Now it makes sense. Everything makes so much more sense. So the sound that happens here sounds like 3PO is maybe descending on a platform.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I wonder, is that put in post, that sound, him going in? I guess it is, isn't it?
I think all of it.
Yeah. And is he even being, is Anthony Daniels even on a platform, or is he just like squatting very slowly down in that scene? Because I can't tell.
His knee joints don't move, and he doesn't, and it's such a smooth. I watched that part several times because because then when he ascends again later to introduce himself, it is
Yep.
also so smooth where it makes me feel like it must be a
Yeah.
platform, which just
Yep.
raises so many questions about how this bath is constructed.
Yeah.
And it makes me also
Yeah.
wonder
Why have they got it?
yeah, and also I was thinking like, okay, so 3PO descends on this platform. It stops perfectly at his neck. So it's like right at the right level. So I'm like, did Luke program that in there for it to stop right there? Or is that just how far it goes? Or did
Mm.
3PO press a button and, he can just lower it to his level? And then I'm like, is R2 going to get an oil bath? And if so, how far will it go for R2? Or how will R2 stand on that? Um, how does that work? And then just all these questions. And then,
Yeah.
but anyway, Luke's like, it just isn't fair. Oh, Biggs is right. I'm never going to get out of here. And then 3PO's
Oh.
like, is there anything I might do to help? And then we're kind of cutting off here. No, not unless you can alter time. And then that's the end of the 5 minutes.
That exchange between the two of them, I remember as a kid, and I think why it seared into my head is like, I think up until that point, I could sort of say, yeah, 3PO is a droid, he's not real. But I remember as a kid that moment actually making me think that he was more real because he was expressing how good something was going to feel, and that he was just having this. And I guess I wasn't able to articulate it as a child, but you can. I think in hindsight, you probably can appreciate that when you're a kid, you pick up on things that you don't know you're picking up on. Like, people are just having a general conversation, and that makes them real people. Whereas like robots and droids doing robotic things and robotic movements and all that, and just saying, "We're here. Oh no, what's happening? Oh, what's happening?" Like that moment really just made 3PO a living, breathing thing for me. That he was having such just a super normal conversation like you would have today. It's like, that bath is going to feel great. Cat. There's a
Yeah.
cat in front of your camera.
That's Anakin. That's the maker.
Anakin. Oh, I love it. It's like this tail. This is like,
Yeah.
it's
For
almost
those
like
listening,
Jaws.
my cat Anakin, the maker, 3PO's maker, just walked by and swished her tail up there. So that's really profound, I think, what you just said. The that the that 3PO expressing that something was going to feel good is something that makes him like real almost.
Mm,
And that's funny that
yeah.
like I think it's interesting that you bring that up because well, I'm someone who's like very intrigued by the conversations and surrounding like artificial intelligence, which is why I think I mean, Blue Bantha Co. is you use artificial intelligence to like create stories, right?
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's basically what we do. We found a an AI bot that you teach it a topic, or you start it with some writing, and then it will just keep writing a story along the same vein. Uh,
Does it use
so yeah,
GT3?
we no, I it's a app called InfoKit.
Okay, okay. But you teach it, so
I don't know.
the more you feed it, the more it kind of learns.
Apparently so, because like I mean, we've done this a few times. We've done this a few times now, and I can tell you the quality of the stuff that it spits out now versus what's close to a year ago. I mean, we started doing this stuff in December last year. I mean, up until that point, we were just doing, um, we've been on YouTube for years, just haphazardly kind of making, you know, quote unquote video essays, and that was not anywhere near as enjoyable as this, but I digress. Uh, when we decided we were going to try this thing out as an experiment, it's like, yeah, let's write a Star Wars story using artificial intelligence, and it was going to be Star Wars Episode 10. Let's do it and see what happens. Like what we were putting into the AI then and what it was spitting out was pretty good, but I can see a marked difference between uh, how well it's constructing sentences and how well it weaves things together now compared to then, compared to a year ago. So I think it does learn. I definitely think it learns and remembers. Yeah, I think remembers is the right term because like sometimes you'll throw in like tiny little bits of writing into it and then hit generate and it will kind of pick up something from like a Star Wars movie and it will start filling in gaps um, in a kind of a realistic way. Like when I say realistic, I mean like in a way that's like, oh yeah, that actually kind of happened there was a version of that actually happened in Star Wars.
Yeah, like I watched your
So I don't
recent
know.
one that you did for the Podathon stream.
Yep,
Um,
the Death Star attack. Yeah.
yeah, and there were a few lines that I was like, that's funny. That sounds like there were definitely some interesting lines in there. And it was actually also hilarious. So that's
So Anakin walking across your
yeah.
keyboard. That's great. Oh, that's great.
That's her motif. So
I love it. So context on that with the Death Star thing. So we did that one a little bit differently because with the other ones we'd um, with the other ones we sort of took existing stories and then put them in to the AI to teach it the setting. So uh, let's go to the start. So episode 10, we took all 9 Star Wars screenplays, made one document out of it, which was a big document, and then copied and pasted it into the AI. And then at the end of that, wrote a new opening crawl to lead into what would be the 10th movie, and then hit go. And we were just generating a story fresh from there. So it had to ingest and learn 9 films worth of characters and stuff, and then we told it what the next part would be at the beginning, and it started writing a story from scratch there. We did that for Banthaverse episode 10, and then for Solo 2, we did the same thing. We just put the first Solo movie script in there and gave it a new setting for what part 2 would be or to begin with, and then it generated a new story. We did a similar thing with episode 2.5. So we put episode 1 and 2 into the script and then gave it a new setting and it wrote new, and we started writing new story with that. But Death Star Attack we did very differently, where we went back to the script for A New Hope and went just to the point in the script where the ships are, the X-wings are all sort of coming towards the Death Star and Yavin's in the background. So it's around there that we begin. And we didn't put the rest of A New Hope in. We just put the real screenplay in little chunks. So we'd put the setting bits from the script where it tells you the people and places. We'd put that in there, and then we'd start. We'd tell the AI, okay, the first person to speak in this is going to be Red Leader, and then we'd hit go, so it would generate Red Leader's dialogue, and we did it a
oh,
lot
okay.
more piecemeal. So that's why there are some lines in there that are just straight out of the script. Like we kept some of that in there to ground it because we wanted people to remember that we are rewriting, for the most part, an actual scene. We're not creating a brand new scene from scratch. So we wanted to keep some of that original stuff in there. So there are lines that are identical. There are lines that we would only feed it half of the line and then let it generate the rest. And that's why there's a few things like like Red Leader does that line, where he tells, I think it's Luke and Biggs or whatever, to like cut the chatter, you know. So we kept that, cut the chatter, and then we let it generate. And I think he says, "I'm going to backhand the both of you," or something like that, like. And so we, it's a bit of a mix and match, and some of it's completely fresh, and then we would say, okay, well, that little bit of dialogue's done, and so let's insert some of the original script in here just to tell the AI that we're cutting to somewhere else, and then we'd get it to generate the dialogue, and then we'd cut it back. So we tried to keep the flow and the cadence of the story the same, and have it mostly generate dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was kind of like pass one. And then pass two is taking some of that narration and putting it into the AI by itself, and just getting it to do something with it and seeing what it comes up with. And sometimes
Yeah.
we do a little bit of a piecemeally find and replace, and then we'd go in and do our pass over it, which is cutting things out, changing names to make it flow better. And we write little bits in there ourselves as well now. Like, we don't leave it entirely to the AI, because otherwise sometimes it can just go completely off the rails.
I think it's
So
interesting that like whenever I hear people talk about how they use AI in their various tools, it's often like the fact that it's AI generated is almost more of like an invitation to people who don't really know much about the project yet, but pretty much always there still is like a lot of creative curation, and like it's almost, yeah, I think there's just, what I'm saying is like it's not like you just say like AI do this and then you're like,
yeah, no,
all right, here's the like, there still is a lot of herding that you are doing, and like a lot of
yep,
curating and writing and picking, and it's almost like the AI is like a generative tool, but like you still have to, you're still basically writing it, you're still doing it.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
just picking what, yeah. Um, yeah,
yeah.
I
That
think
that
that's
is that
interesting.
is very true, very true. The way Sean and I have described it to others in the past has been, imagine that it was a TV show, and you're in the writer's room. You've got like so Sean and I, we're the showrunners, and then we've got the writing team. And in this case, the writing team is just the AI. And so we're basically controlling, we are there controlling the whiteboard. And the AI is throwing story plot points and story at us, and we're basically getting it and going, that's crap. No, that's good. Keep. And then we're putting it all up on the whiteboard, sometimes completely out of order, and then assembling it to say, okay, the story overall, like we know what the overall story is going to be, because we write the opening crawl, which sets the scene for the AI and tells it where to begin. And we have to kind of know what the end is going to be. Otherwise,
Mhm.
kind of like we happened with episode 10, we didn't
So I'll
have
put a
an
link to that in the
ending
show
in
notes
mind.
if people want to check out the Star Wars episode 10 on, it's on your YouTube channel. Yeah. Blue Bantha Milk Co.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
And it's chaotic because we didn't wrangle it. That was our first go. And so there is just so many things happening in that story. And we learned from that. It's like, yeah, we need to wrangle it a lot harder than we did the first time around. Like that's on paper, that story is, it makes perfect sense, but like when you're doing it as a table read and everyone's laughing and all that, it's easy to get kind of lost. But and look, Xanthi, I'll send you the scripts as well. Like, so if you're interested, have a read, because I guarantee, like how that is read, it it's like the Rise of Skywalker in a sense. There is so much happening that it can be hard to follow. It's like, what? Now you're here, now you're there, now you're there, and it's. And so we really have learned, it's like we're doing these as live table reads, and it's only it's narrative. There's no visuals to support really what's happening other than the odd illustration will pop up. Like, so we have to really, really edit the hell out of it, and
to me, that's the
take
hardest part.
creative control. It
Yeah.
is. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Like, it's more work than doing we thought this would be more fun and easier, but it's a lot of work. That's why we can only do a few a
Yeah,
year.
as soon as I like learned about you guys, I was like, it would be easier to be the AI for sure. Like I'm an
Oh
ideas
God, yeah.
person. It's the hardest part about being an artist for me is deciding what directions to go with, and like just the decision making is the curation is like what makes for me the art making practice more than just the ability to generate blah like anything. Um,
Yep.
and I think it's the reason that I'm like kind of interested is like you did Star Wars Episode 10, which is funny because I don't know if you've heard of Beethoven's 10th. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so
I've
yeah,
heard of.
okay, so Beethoven's 10th was an AI generated Beethoven's 10th Symphony, AI generated,
Yeah.
and I've been really interested in the conversations surrounding that, and
Yeah.
it really makes you wonder like what I know. I'll just say personally, like I don't think Beethoven's. I am not very much of a fan of it, and not because it's not a good symphony. You know that almost doesn't matter because these things are all subjective. But it's like the intrigue of AI for me is not what just seeing what impossible things AI can do, because it's not interesting to watch AI do really really great thing, like really amazing things, like at some
Mm,
that's a novelty once, that's what
yeah.
is really interesting, I think, is seeing a human do those things, and, seeing a
Mm,
human struggle, and in, so basically anytime like I see an AI project that I think is any good, there is a lot of like it's a human voice is still definitely coming through. Like the AI, it's not like AI making a thing. It's like it's still very much a human
yeah.
endeavor, and so that is kind of a yeah. I guess that's all I wanted to say about that. And it does make
Mm,
me wonder, like, what would happen if John Williams's music were put into AI? I'm sure it's been done. I'm sure someone's done it. Like, what would come out of it? Um,
mm.
like, what would AI think a John Williams? How would AI score Star Wars Episode 10, for example, based on, and I think a lot of it would be it would be interesting, and a lot of it would be like, that's not really. I mean, but who's to say? We all hear different
Mm.
things in Star Wars, which is why I guess this is a good segue to the Star Wars Music Minute questionnaire. And the reason I asked this question is precisely because people hear different things in the same thing, And okay, so question number 1 is, in exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
Action, danger, romance. And I know that's very descriptive, like that's
That's good.
descriptive of of something, but I remember being in my I remember being in my 20s, early 20s, and there was this guy that was kind of like a friend of this business that I worked at. He was always in there. I worked as kind of a consultant, and he was this. Uh, he's just he was a bit about 10 years older than everyone. Is this total hipster, like really into his craft work and his German beer and all that. And so in your early 20s, you're just like, like hang on every word this guy says, and he floated this idea to me that like anything good anything good is an equal balance between action, danger, and romance. And I actually think, even though he was one of those guys that, maybe like to hear himself speak a little bit, I think there was some truth in that. Like I think any good drama, any good entertainment, any good story, any good music has elements of those things in it. Not just those three things, but they're the strongest the strongest aspects of media, I think, that tend to stand out to me. It's like, like I always remember those things. Like if I'm watching a film, I remember the action, I remember the danger, I remember the romance.
That's a very poetic
And
response, and it will be forever seared in your in your response. That's very poetic. Wow, everyone has had such different responses, and they've all been like, "Yeah, that's so true." Um, I love it. Thank you. And question number 2 is,
Yeah.
what's something related to Star Wars music or sound that you want to learn more about?
Uh, well, it's a good segue to an upcoming episode for you because you said you were going to talk about some of the outtakes of the Force theme. And uh, I think that that's something that gets underrepresented when people talk about music and behind the scenes and all that sort of stuff. Like, there's endless, endless deep dives into the VFX, the behind the scenes productions, the actual score itself, but very rarely is there any insight uh, and good big serious deep dives into the music that didn't make it
Oh my gosh, I
and
can't wait till
why
people
it
hear that
didn't make
that
it.
episode.
Yeah, like David W. Collins did a little bit, I think, in one of his episodes, but he only touched on it in one of his episodes, I think. And also, there's Art of the Score
Mm-hmm.
podcast who also talked, again, they spoke about it just a little bit because they were talking about, I think, the Force theme and just happened to mention that, oh yeah, there were some other versions of it. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
hearing some of those other versions of the Force theme that could have been for the first time. I was really intrigued, but God, I want to hear more about and know more about what it was, what quality of it made Williams say no. It's that sort of stuff that really intrigues me. It's about anything really. It's like why did
Okay.
the thing get cut?
So, why did the thing get cut? So, okay, so
Yeah,
your answer, I'm going to say, is the unused music, the
yeah,
unused music. And everything that you just
yeah.
said is like exactly the stuff that we talk about in that episode. Um,
Awesome,
so, so listeners,
awesome.
promo for episode 6, Binary Sunset Breakdown with film musicologist and John Williams scholar, Frank Lehman. Um, okay,
Awesome.
final question. What is a score or soundtrack you're fond of besides Star Wars?
Uh, I'm not going to answer with just one because I couldn't decide. I was thinking about this. Side note, thank you for providing notes. It's not often that I go into a podcast and have
Oh,
any kind of prep. It's so good. So
oh,
good being able to
you're
think
welcome.
about this stuff beforehand. Um, so I I couldn't decide on a single,
Okay.
like on one soundtrack. So there's a bunch that I'm going to name, and they're I think they're all fairly different from each other, but they tend to get the most the most plays. And that was kind of actually how I had to do it. I like looking at data, so I opened up Apple Music and
You see which ones had
looked
the
to see
most
what my
play count.
yeah, which ones am I listening to the most?
So what are they?
Because there's a lot of so the Tenet score by Ludwig Göransson is phenomenal, and I find that to have such a booming presence, like for something that's got a lot of electronic sounds in it, it it which doesn't always kind of interest me. Like I don't listen to a lot of electronic music, uh, but the Tenet soundtrack is one of my favorites from the last few years, and I love it. Um, then there's a video game soundtrack. So from one of my favorite games, and it's very different from Tenet, is Horizon Zero Dawn. The composer for that is, and I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation, but I want to say it's Joris de Man. Joris, it's spelled Joris. De
I'll put
Man.
all the links in the show notes and I'll Google to
Yeah.
find the spelling.
So yeah, Joris de Man's Horizon Zero Dawn soundtrack is spectacular. Like it is really, really, really stunning work. The story itself is quite near and dear to me. I love it, and the music tells the story. which I really appreciate about it. It's so rich, and if you know the world of the game as well, you hear it, and it takes you right back. It's yeah, fantastic. And then there's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly by Ennio Morricone.
Classic.
Fantastic, fantastic. Like I love the good Western soundtrack, but his spin on the Western soundtrack is yeah is some of my favorite. And then
Awesome. One more.
Hans Zimmer, Inception soundtrack and the Interstellar soundtrack. I think Inception uh, because I love the film, but Interstellar, I think I probably love the score a bit more because it's such a in parts of the film it's so present, and like if you've ever seen Interstellar in IMAX, it's like it's audibly uh, almost overwhelming in parts. Like there's a quality that they have in the mix during the film where it verges on distortion. It's so loud and so overpowering, uh, and I really feel that in the score. And then the last one that's going to get a shout out is Natalie Holt's Loki score.
Ah, new.
Yeah, I love it, absolutely
Awesome.
love it.
And that is a TV show. I'm going to put links to all
Yeah,
these in the show notes. Thank you so much for answering the Star Wars Music Minute questionnaire.
no worries.
It's definitely, I love hearing how different everyone's sort of taste is. It's fantastic. I think we're about done here, but I want to run through the stats of this 5 minutes. So the themes that we hear are the Imperials motif, diminutive creatures, Jawas, the Sandcrawler, and of course the Star Wars main theme. And if you're following along on any of the soundtracks, I'm going to list off various titles that the things that we heard go by. So some of these will be doubles, but depending on which soundtrack you have, it might be called something different. So we have the Dune Sea of Tatooine / Jawa Sandcrawler. On one soundtrack, it's called The Little People Work. And then we also have Mouse Robot and Blasting Off. We also have The Desert and the Robot Auction. And then you might also see something called The Moisture Farm. So, yeah, there's a lot of different titles on the soundtracks.
There's tons in 5 minutes.
And they're all a little bit different. So that's fun. Last but not least, you can find Blue Bantha Milk Co. on YouTube, on Twitter. Are you a podcast platform too, or?
No. So YouTube is our main
Cool.
gig.
So go there.
All of our stuff is there. All of our let's call it community outreach or just me complaining about things is on Twitter, which is just at Blue Bantha Milk. You can also find us on Instagram, which we don't post all that much on. Facebook, we have a Facebook group if you want to come and hang out with us and talk with a good group of people. And I think that's it. We release audio versions to our Patreon patrons of all of our stuff, but that's the only podcasting platform as such that we have.
Awesome. So yes, listeners, check them out if you're interested in AI generated fan fiction performances. The Banthaverse. It's really, some of it is just, I recommend just even checking it out if you're just like, I don't understand what that means. I highly recommend just checking out one show, one episode. It's very interesting. And acknowledgements for the show. Thank you so much to Frank Lehman for writing the complete catalog of the musical themes of Star Wars. Theme names are not set in stone, but if anyone wants to follow along with the exact names that I use, I just use the names put forth in that catalog because they have internal consistency, and it is widely available for free at his website. So all the links will be in the show notes. With that, it's been a fun episode, and I will see you next week for minutes 21 through 25 of Star Wars: A New Hope on Star Wars Music Minute.